President Trump are increasing tensions with two U.S. trade partners. As of today, 50% tariff.
White House just hit Brazilian goods, for example, including coffee, with a 50% tariff.
Wish this wasn't happening, especially to small businesses at this time.
Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, reaching for your daily cup of coffee, and finding out it now costs almost double. Not because the beans suddenly ran out, not because farmers can't grow it, but because of one political decision that shook the entire coffee world overnight. A decision made in Washington, but the consequences? They stretch from the streets of New York all the way to the coffee fields of Brazil and beyond. This isn't just about coffee. This is about power, money, and a trade war that could change the way America wakes up every single morning. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Has the U.S. just handed over the future of your morning cup to someone else? Coffee isn't just another drink in America. It's survival fuel. From early morning commuters clutching their paper cups, to college students cramming late at night, to executives sealing deals in boardrooms, coffee is everywhere. The numbers back this up. According to fresh USDA data, Americans consume more than 24.5 million bags of coffee every single year. That's around 10.8 pounds per person. And if you do the math, it translates into a market worth nearly $3.7 billion. This isn't a luxury item, it's a cultural lifeline. Without it, mornings in the U.S. would grind to a halt. But here's the problem. America barely grows coffee at all. The climate just doesn't allow it. Aside from small operations in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and a few experimental farms in California, the U.S. has almost no domestic production. That means America is addicted to imports. And one supplier matters more than anyone else: Brazil. Brazil, the coffee giant. Brazil is the world's coffee powerhouse. It produces more beans than any other country on earth, and around 30% of all U.S. imports come directly from Brazilian soil. That's right, 1 in every 3 cups of coffee in the U.S. is Brazilian. And this isn't by accident. Brazil has everything: massive growing regions, perfect climates, skilled farmers, and infrastructure that's been refined over a century. For decades, this relationship worked like clockwork. Brazil exported steady, affordable beans. America bought them. Coffee shops, supermarkets, and households relied on Brazilian Arabica beans, the quiet backbone of America's coffee culture. These beans aren't flashy, but they deliver consistency at a price that works. If you've sipped Starbucks, Dunkin', Maxwell House, or even a generic supermarket blend, odds are you were drinking Brazil. But all of that is now on the edge of collapse. On August 1st, 2025, President Trump dropped a bombshell: a 50% tariff on all Brazilian coffee imports. Overnight, the steady flow of beans that fueled America turned into a political weapon. The move was framed as an effort to level the playing field in trade, but for coffee drinkers, it was a nightmare. Think about it. The U.S., the world's largest coffee consumer, suddenly went to war with Brazil, the world's largest coffee supplier. And the fallout was immediate. Brazil's president fired back, saying, "I will not humiliate myself, refusing any negotiation or concession." That wasn't just a soundbite. It was a warning to the world. Brazil wouldn't bend. And when Brazil pushed back, the global coffee market shook to its core. For American importers, this was chaos. Contracts were ripped up overnight. Shipments stalled. Within the first week, imports from Brazil fell by 18% compared to the same time last year. And when supply chains break, prices spike. At the start of 2025, the average pound of ground coffee sold for $6.90 to $7.10. After the tariff, that same pound shot up to $8.13 nationwide, crossing the 9 mark in states like California and New York. That means an average family buying 3 to 4 pounds of coffee a month suddenly paid an extra $36 to $60 a year. Now, maybe that doesn't sound catastrophic at first glance, but stack that on top of higher grocery bills, higher gas prices, and rising rents. Suddenly, coffee feels like one burden too many. And unlike luxury items you can skip, coffee is something millions refuse to live without. Here's what makes this situation so dangerous. The U.S. has no fallback. If tariffs hit steel or cars, American factories can try to pick up the slack. But with coffee, there's no quick fix. You can't just plant a coffee field in Kansas and expect beans to grow. The climate won't allow it. So when the pipeline from Brazil slows down, America feels the pain instantly. The country has built its coffee culture around cheap, reliable access. And without Brazil, that system collapses. It's like pulling out the foundation of a building. Everything else starts to wobble. And here's the twist. While many assumed Brazil would suffer, the opposite happened. Instead of bowing to U.S. pressure, Brazil turned outward. Within days, officials were signing new trade deals, making it clear they didn't need America to keep their coffee empire alive. The biggest new player? China. Just 3 days after the tariff was announced, Beijing granted export licenses to more than 220 Brazilian coffee companies. For Brazil, this was massive. China's coffee consumption has been rising at one of the fastest rates in the world, thanks to a booming cafe culture in cities like Shanghai and Beijing. So what looked like a U.S. power move turned into Brazil's chance to diversify and America's chance to lose its most important coffee partner. What once was considered a tea nation is now obsessed with cappuccinos, lattes, and flat whites. That nation? China. By throwing open its doors to Brazilian exporters, China didn't just offer an alternative market. It offered a billion-strong consumer base with a rapidly growing taste for premium coffee. And in a single move, Beijing positioned itself to become a central player in a coffee market America once dominated. And China wasn't alone. Europe quickly followed. In Germany, retail giant Ruva signed a groundbreaking deal with a Brazilian cooperative that had previously supplied American roasters. On paper, it looked like just another business contract. But in reality, it laid the foundation for long-term partnerships that could permanently redirect Brazil's coffee away from U.S. shelves and into European mugs. Why? One word: stability. While the U.S. played political games, Europe offered something Brazil desperately wanted: predictable demand with no tariffs. And South Korea and Japan also moved fast. Both countries already rank among the world's top importers of specialty and commercial-grade coffee. And now, they were locking in even more Brazilian beans. Beans that used to be earmarked for U.S. customers. This wasn't just about buying coffee. It was about sending a message. The United States was no longer the only market that mattered. Brazil's rapid pivot revealed just how much power it held. In a matter of weeks, the world's largest coffee producer showed it could not only survive without the U.S., it could thrive. For decades, the U.S. acted like the center of the coffee universe, the buyer every producer wanted, the market that set the standards. But after August of 2025, that illusion shattered. Brazil's defiance proved a painful truth. The U.S. wasn't irreplaceable. It was just another customer, and one with unpredictable rules. For American roasters, that realization hit like a ton of bricks. Losing easy access to Brazilian beans meant higher costs, smaller margins, and brutal competition against rivals in Europe and Asia, who were still getting their coffee cheaper and steadier. The shock of the tariff wasn't just something to read about in business headlines. It hit directly inside American homes. Supermarket shelves told the story first. Prices jumped fast. The average pound of ground coffee that once sat under $7 now pushed past $8 nationwide. In expensive states like California and New York, many brands blew past the $9 mark. USDA data showed a 16% jump in retail prices since spring. That meant families were suddenly paying between $50 and $100 more a year just to keep up their usual coffee habits. Now, maybe big chains like Starbucks or Dunkin' could cushion the blow. Their long-term contracts and global buying power softened the impact, at least temporarily. But for independent cafés and budget-conscious households, the story was completely different. Coffee, once one of America's cheapest little indulgences, was turning into a luxury. For small coffee shops, the tariff was devastating. These businesses run on razor-thin margins. When distributors hiked prices by 30 to 40%, small owners had no wiggle room. Some tried replacing Brazilian Arabica with cheaper Robusta beans from Southeast Asia or blends from Ethiopia and Honduras. But customers noticed the difference immediately. The smooth, mild taste they'd grown to love was gone. And here's the kicker. For a cafe, losing flavor doesn't just mean losing taste. It means losing identity. Stories poured in from across the country. In Ohio, a family-owned grocery reported customers abandoning carts after seeing price hikes. In Kansas, a cafe cut opening hours after sales plunged 20% once their signature blend changed. In Oregon, a small-town shop laid off 2 workers and slashed its pastry menu just to survive. In Florida, a Cuban-American cafe famous for its espresso couldn't replicate its signature drink without Brazilian beans, losing weekend tourists almost overnight. These weren't just financial setbacks. They were community wounds. Cafes had long been gathering spots, cultural anchors, and small-town lifelines. When the taste shifted or prices soared, entire main streets went quiet. Bookstores lost browsers. Bakeries lost morning traffic. The familiar hum of conversation over coffee disappeared. A trade war thousands of miles away was erasing pieces of American community life, one cup at a time. And while Washington fought with tariffs, something unexpected was happening right next door, Canada. Instead of making loud moves, Ottawa stayed silent, and that silence became its secret weapon. With no new barriers, Canadian importers quietly increased Brazilian purchases. By the end of 2024, Canada's imports of Brazilian coffee had already risen more than 7%. When U.S. demand collapsed in 2025, Canada was perfectly positioned to scoop up even more. For Brazil, Canada offered everything America no longer did: stability, predictability, and reliability. No political drama, no sudden tariffs, just business. Industry analysts now believe Canada could ink long-term supply agreements worth billions. Deals that would not only secure coffee for Canadian consumers, but also elevate Canada into a top-tier buyer, potentially overtaking the United States. In just a few months, a quiet northern neighbor transformed into a strategic coffee powerhouse. So let's step back. In less than 90 days, the coffee world flipped upside down. China turned its tea culture into a coffee revolution. Europe locked in new deals, cementing stability. Japan and South Korea secured premium supply chains. Canada rose quietly into a global coffee player. And the United States, the country that once dictated the global coffee trade, suddenly found itself on the sidelines. The tariff wasn't just about money or trade. It was about identity, culture, and the rhythm of daily American life. And now, the big question remains. If coffee can be turned into a political weapon this easily, what's next? Canadian consumers hardly noticed the storm raging just across the border. While shoppers in California and New York were paying over $9 a pound, Canadians were still sipping the same blends they'd trusted for years at the same prices. No panic, no shortages, no drama. That stability became a weapon in itself. It reassured loyal customers, protected small cafes, and made Canada look like a dream partner for Brazilian exporters. At the center of it all was Tim Hortons, Canada's most iconic coffee chain. With steady access to Brazilian beans, Tim Hortons didn't flinch while U.S. competitors scrambled. Prices stayed predictable, cups stayed full, and the brand's reputation grew stronger. Other Canadian roasters, from big names like Kicking Horse to small boutique brands, cashed in too. They not only protected their home turf, but started selling directly to U.S. customers online. Reports showed more and more Americans typing their credit card numbers into Canadian websites just to get coffee that hadn't doubled in price. And here's the irony. While Washington tried to punish Brazil, it was Canadian businesses, quiet, steady, and drama-free, that ended up winning the jackpot. But the consequences of America's gamble didn't stop at the border. Other producers were watching closely. Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, Indonesia. These countries supply a massive share of the world's beans, and they were left wondering, If the U.S. could turn against Brazil, who's next? That fear was enough to shake the entire global market. In New York, Arabica futures spiked 34% in just 2 months, hitting $2.40 per pound. In London, Robusta prices soared even higher, up 56% to nearly $1.95 per pound. These weren't just numbers on a screen. They dictated what importers paid and ultimately what everyday consumers spent at the store. For farmers, the price boom looked like a blessing at first. More dollars for their beans. But beneath the surface, there was danger. If tariffs spread to multiple suppliers, the global coffee system could spiral into chaos. And remember, coffee isn't like wheat or corn. You can't just plant more fields and harvest next season. Coffee trees take years to mature. Harvests depend on rainfall, altitude, and delicate ecosystems. If that fragile balance is disrupted, the world doesn't just pay more. It faces shortages that no one can fix overnight. Reliability is the true currency of global trade. And with the stroke of a pen, America lost it. For decades, U.S. demand had anchored the coffee world. Exporters trusted American contracts because they were stable, predictable, and profitable. But after August 2025, that trust cracked wide open. Buyers in Europe and Asia started shifting toward long-term contracts that avoided U.S. risk. Countries like China, Germany, and Japan stepped in eagerly, offering producers what America no longer could: certainty. Every new deal signed outside the U.S. wasn't just a business decision. It was a quiet vote of no confidence in Washington's leadership. The ripple effect was undeniable. A nation that once defined global coffee standards now found itself sidelined, while competitors built stronger, steadier supply lines for the future. Let's zoom out. The tariff wasn't just about coffee. It exposed something deeper: a vulnerability in America's role as a trading giant. If Washington is willing to weaponize something as universal, as personal as your morning cup of coffee, what else could be next? Grains, electronics, medicine. The world is watching, and every time the U.S. throws up another tariff wall, another competitor steps forward to take its place. So let's bring this back to you, the person watching this video. Right now, you might be holding a cup of coffee in your hand. Ask yourself, would you still drink it if the price doubled again next year? What if the brand you love vanished from shelves entirely? And what if the power to decide all of that no longer rested in Washington, but in Beijing, Berlin, or Ottawa? Because here's the truth: the coffee you drink tomorrow isn't just about taste. It's about who controls the future. And while America argues over tariffs, the rest of the world is busy building the supply chains of tomorrow. The question is, will the U.S. ever get back its coffee crown? Or has it already lost it forever? Now, if you want to keep your mornings safe and your wallet full, you need to stay ahead of stories like this. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, because this isn't the last food crisis on the horizon. Next, we're diving into something even bigger: the shocking truth about America's bread supply and the hidden war for wheat. Smash that like if you believe your morning coffee should never become a luxury. And tell me in the comments, would you pay $10 for a pound of coffee, or would you give it up entirely? Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.